science is not purely neutral and it's not purely objective. Now, again, that doesn't mean that I'm saying there's no truth or that there's no objective truth. I'm just making the point that truth, in my view, is not determined just by reading off a list of facts or presenting a bunch of things in front of someone. It's really a deeper question of worldviews and paradigms, is what I'm trying to say. So that is the first text that comes to mind when we consider the bigger questions and characters that will make up continental philosophy in contrast to the analytical Western tradition. And next I want to call your attention to Structures of Scientific Revolution by Thomas Kuhn. And of course, this is a very famous book, award-winning book. Not saying that makes it true. I'm just saying it's very well known. And it's well known for a reason, because it makes a damn good point. Kuhn makes the argument that the times in history that we've had these giant paradigm shifts, out of, say, Renaissance Platonism or medieval theology and Platonism into Descartes and scientific revolution and then into Newtonianism, there were big-scale political and monetary, banking, etc. I'm adding that part from like Tragedy and Hope. There were other events that played a role in, quote, science. And so science is not just this thing where, everybody's just, salivating and licking their lips to be wrong, and that's how it's presented. It's like, all we want is to be wrong. We can't wait to be refuted, which is total nonsense. I mean, that's just not human nature, for one. Nobody ever wants to be wrong. Everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to have egg on their face. It's just not human nature to be so quick to admit wrong, and especially when it's egos and so-called science and big scale issues at work here. And so Newtonianism, I believe, was a very fraudulent, partially correct worldview that was foisted upon the world at the behest of the Royal Society and the Anglo-American establishment, particularly for the purpose of promoting, eventually it would become Darwinism and scientism, materialism, atomism. That's all nonsensical. And even if you don't buy into quantum physics and all that stuff, it's still, I think, historically accurate to point out the errors of the resultant materialism that comes out of all this. And the absurdity on top of that is Newton and all his buddies were alchemists. I've pointed this out for years, many times. When I was in undergrad, I watched this documentary that we had at the library on Newton. I couldn't believe it because it was all about Newton and his obsessions with alchemy and magic and all this stuff. And I really think he believed that. He wasn't just faking it or anything. He wasn't just a secret spy. He really believed that stuff. He's got volumes of writings on it that are, I believe, housed in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or somewhere. And the Newton Library. And so he really thought that stuff was how you understand the world. And so many of those guys did. Kepler, they're all into Neoplatonism and alchemy. Paracelsus. So, again, the point being, the paradigms don't just happen because one guy comes up with the best argument. That's just not how the world works. If it was, why would you think that? Do the best movie stars get their job because they were just simply the best actors? Well, of course not. Who was screwing who to get what job, right? Who was willing to go to the Eyes Wide Shut parties and be passed around at the party? That's what gets you the acting jobs, not just being the best, right? Like, who's the best guitarist? Oh, it's whoever can play it the best. No, that's not how the world works. So it's really stupid and naive, and obviously some sort of just dumb pop propaganda thing that you see in these Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and Dawkins and Tyson and Bill Nye and all these characters. And there's no better example than Bill Nye, of course, being the totally reversing his position on chromosomes determining the biological sex, because obviously he was paid to do that. And Bill Nye was on a sketch show. I forgot about that too. Somebody pointed that out, and I used to watch that Canadian sketch show that he was on. So Bill Nye is a comedian. He has no actual training in science aside from whatever kind of engineering he's done, which, oddly enough, in a way, engineering is kind of science, depending on what it is. But this guy gets up here and tries to talk to you about biology. Well, I thought, wait a minute, I thought you can't talk about something unless you have a degree in that. That's what the scientism proponents are always saying with their esoteric religion of Darwinism and scientism. But Bill Nye doesn't have a degree in anything related to biological life sciences. So why is he talking about it? Now, Kuhn is wrong in his piece, his famous work, to ultimately fall into the trap of, well, if we admit that things are determined by paradigms, does that mean everything's a paradigm and we're stuck in the paradigm box and we'll never get out? No. Again, because Kuhn apparently wasn't aware of presuppositional philosophy, transcendental arguments, and coherence theory of truth, or comparing worldviews as a whole to look for the internal inconsistencies. But regardless, you can still gain a lot of insight in terms of understanding the critique of scientism, even from characters within the establishment. That's what we're trying to get at here. Just like we would read Tragedy and Hope to understand the inside CFR view of the 20th century. Here we're looking at guys from within the Western academic establishment kind of saying, hey, this thing doesn't work. A lot of this stuff is nonsense. So as mentioned, one of the great books that deals with breaking through the barrier of scientism is Wolfgang Smith's Cosmos and Transcendence. It's in my recommended reading list, and I mentioned it many times. Very good book. And, he goes back to the Newtonian period, especially early on in the book, to critique that dogmatism and the flaws in it. And if you want more of that kind of material relating to what I was talking about earlier on in the first section of this talk, I highly recommend that book. But we have to kind of go back to Kant, and Kant really leaves us with anarchy in philosophy. Now, that's not Kant's goal. He's not in any way an anarchist. Kant was actually one of the earliest forerunners of globalism and promoting the idea of a global government, believe it or not. So we're going to get into that. Actually, I'm going to show you. Let me show you that really quick. Kant, of course, wrote the famous essay Perpetual Peace, philosophical essay. What's funny is that I found this on whatever this libertarian website is that they laud and praise this about how great it was. I thought we were against global government. Wait a minute. Hey, what's the deal here? Oh, no, this is the good libertarian global government where looks like in order to have the free market globally, we're going to have a global police force to enforce peace so that we can have the market god dominating. So this is once again testament to the absurdity of libertarianism and classical liberalism as the means by which to achieve the utopia and the global government. It's a scam. And that's why von Hayek says the exact same thing in his book, Road to Serfdom. He has the appendix on how to create the global government. And I don't know why you libertarians can't get that through your head. It's just stupid. And you ought to know better by now because we've talked about it and called it out so many times. I have. And, I mean, you know what? Just stay stupid. Stay in your idiocy and forget about it. So next, though, the reason we bring up Kant, though, was not just global government, but to show that it's connected. The economic theory of Kant is connected to the economics of Newtonianism and what spreads. Again, this is in my essay that I've shared many times, been shared hundreds of times by others, the metaphysical implications of nominalist economics, and it shows how the philosophical theories invariably affect the economic theories. That's why man becomes the unit that is consumed and traded. So what we're talking about, though, is continental philosophy. I'm just trying to point out, I want you to understand that continental philosophy is just as riddled with contradictions and nonsense as the American analytical logic, mathematics obsessed traditions are, because they, of course, have no place for God or objective truth ultimately. Now, they may profess something like, oh, math is ultimate truth or something like that, but it's like Bertrand Russell thinks mathematics can explain everything. When you get down to the brass tacks, he's a relativist and a global government, madman. But I just, again, keep this in mind. Immanuel Kant, Perpetual Peace Philosophical Essay, because you got all these guys at this time who are really promoting global government back then. So the modern notions of globalism, and let me show you this. There's even a, I did have a University of Chicago work. Oh crap, I've already lost it. University of Chicago has a book that deals with early notions of globalism, I think is the title of it. And it, of course, contains contests. But he also mentions Rousseau and the French Revolutionary characters, obviously, right? Because they're the fathers of internationalism, right, with the communist Marxist movements. So internationalism is just another flavor or version. I mean, the communist internationalism is just another flavor or version of the international market guys like Kant and Adam Smith and all those characters. So that shows you, again, just making the point that this philosophy spills out into the rest of society and the rest of thought in the West. And so they're not isolated. The philosophy of those days is not isolated and having basically nothing to do with, what's going on in the marketplace. It's directly related, because these guys, these scoundrels, are the ones who are giving the philosophy the basis, supposedly, for how there can be a one world order. I'd love to hear whoever is the online Library of Liberty, how they explain that, but I don't think they're going to have any explanation for that.